They erased me from every photo, so I erased their lifeline, one autopay at a time. When the flash pops at the gala, only one face will remain in frame, and it won't be theirs. Tonight, family gets spelled in legal paperwork and public evidence. My name is Rowan Delaney. The scent of professionally arranged sage and lilies hits you the moment you cross the threshold of my parents' house in Riverton Heights. It's a custom blend curated by a florist whose invoices I pay monthly, designed to smell like old money and effortless grace. Nothing in this house is effortless. Thanksgiving is the pinnacle of this performance, a carefully produced tableau where every element, from the heirloom china gleaming under the recessed lighting to the seasonally appropriate goods on the mantelpiece, is chosen to project an image of familial harmony. The bill for this harmony, in all its myriad forms, always lands on my desk. I arrived alone this year. At 36, the founder and CEO of a national beauty brand, arriving alone should feel like a statement of independence. Today, it just felt like a vulnerability. My daughter, Mira, was with her father. It wasn't a matter of custody drama. We'd settled that years ago with the cool efficiency of a business negotiation, but simple logistics. His family was closer this year, and it made sense. Still, my solitude felt like a missing limb as I handed my coat to the housekeeper my mother hires for events, another expense I absorb without comment. My mother, Margaret, glided out from the dining room, her arms outstretched. She radiated a brand of hospitality so flawless it felt like a corporate asset. Her smile was wide, her cashmere sweater the color of oatmeal. Her embrace was brief and fragrant. "Rowan darling, you made it." We were just about to sit down. The subtext was clear, "You're late. You're holding us up." The traffic on the interstate was brutal, Mom, I said, the excuse tasting like ash in my mouth. It was true, but the truth rarely mattered here. "Of course, darling." Her hand squeezed my arm, a gesture that looked like affection, but felt like a warning. Steel wrapped in cashmere. My father, Thomas, stood by the massive stone fireplace, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He gave me a nod, the quintessential performance of dignified silence that he had perfected over 40 years of marriage. He was a man made of quiet approvals and even quieter disapprovals. His presence was an anchor, but one that kept the family ship moored in the shallow, placid waters of polite denial. He would never start a fight, but he would never step in to stop one either. The living room was filled with the low hum of conversation. My sister Violet detached herself from a conversation with her husband, Grant, and drifted towards me. Violet is 2 years younger, an aspiring lifestyle influencer, who has turned having good taste into a kind of weapon. She looked me up and down, her head tilted in a pantomime of sweet appraisal. "Rowan, that dress is a lovely color." "Slate blue, isn't it?" she chirped, her voice light and airy. She leaned in, her smile never faltering. "A brave choice. Considering the cratering Q4 margins I read about on Twitter, I just hope it's not a reflection of things at Lumenville." The words were a perfectly crafted missile designed to explode under the surface. She mentioned my company, invoked a public forum, and feigned concern, all while delivering a direct hit to my professional pride. It was a specialty, sweetly barbed compliments that left you bleeding internally while everyone else just heard the melody. I forced a neutral smile, the kind I use in tense board meetings. Q4 is always a volatile quarter for beauty. We were well positioned for the holiday rush. You know how it is. She didn't know how it was. Her boutique businesses, funded by a series of loans from me that were never intended to be repaid, had never seen a second quarter, let alone a fourth. But I played my part. I deflected. I minimized. "Well, I'm so glad to hear it," she said, her eyes already scanning the room for a more interesting target. The call for the family portrait came just before dinner. It was a non-negotiable ritual, as much a part of the Thanksgiving production as the turkey. A professional photographer, a man named Evan Pike, whose day rate was astronomical, was setting up his lights by the fireplace. My father, who hated being photographed, stood stiffly. My mother directed everyone with the precision of a field marshal. Grant dear, you stand next to Thomas. Violet on your husband's arm. Perfect. I moved to stand beside my mother, but she subtly shifted her hand, guiding me towards the outer edge of the group, next to a wingback chair. Rowan, right there, darling. So, we have a nice, balanced frame. I was on the fringe, my shoulder almost touching the rough stone of the fireplace. I watched as Evan adjusted his lens. I saw the way my mother's smile tightened and warmed when she looked at Grant, a successful orthopedic surgeon who fit seamlessly into the Delaney family aesthetic. I saw the way my father clapped him on the shoulder, a rare display of physical warmth. Then their eyes would pass over me, and the warmth would recede, replaced by a polite, camera-ready coolness. It was the look they gave a valued, but slightly problematic business associate. Evan directed us. Okay, big smiles. Everyone look right here. 1, 2. The shutter clicked. The sound was sharp. Definitive. In the silent room, it landed with the terrifying delicacy of thin ice crackling under a heavy weight. A fracture line spreading outwards. Wonderful, Evan said, checking his display. Let's get a few more. As we shuffled and reset, Violet leaned towards my mother. Her voice was a conspiratorial whisper that was meant to be overheard. I was thinking we could make a real coffee table album this year, Mom. Something truly timeless, neutral tones, very consistent, a real heirloom. What a lovely idea, sweetie. Margaret cud. Consistent. The word hung in the air. I knew what it meant. It was the family's code for compliance, for fitting into the pre-approved narrative. I spent the rest of the evening forcing neutral small talk. I discussed interest rates with Grant, complimented the floral arrangements, and asked the housekeeper about her children. With every polite word, every forced smile, I felt myself filing away the microcuts, Violet's jab, my mother's placement of me at the edge of the frame, my father's indifferent nod. They were all data points entered into the quiet, locked cabinet in the back of my mind where I kept the unvarnished truth about my family. Dinner was served, the turkey was perfectly browned, the mashed potatoes impossibly smooth. The conversation flowed around me, a river of anecdotes and inside jokes from which I felt strangely distant. I was the rock on the riverbank, solid and unmoving, the water parting around me. I was present, but I was not part of the current. As the evening wound down and guests began to collect their coats, my mother found me in the hall. She placed a hand on my cheek, her skin dry and cool. Thank you for everything, Rowan, she said, her voice dropping to a sincere-sounding hush. For underwriting Thanksgiving again. It really wouldn't be possible without you. She said it as if she were thanking me for bringing a bottle of wine, not for funding the entire multi-thousand-dollar event. She framed it as a tradition, a role I had naturally fallen into rather than a responsibility I had been deliberately assigned. It was a masterful move, simultaneously acknowledging my contribution while diminishing its significance, ensuring I remained the benefactor, but never the matriarch. Of course, Mom, I said. It was all I could say. It was all I was ever expected to say. The drive home was dark. The bare branches of the maple trees clawed at a starless sky. The heated leather of my car seat felt like the only warmth in the world. I kept hearing the sharp, clean sound of the camera's shutter and Violet's voice talking about a timeless, neutral, consistent album. I thought about the word consistency, and how in my family it had nothing to do with reliability or steadfastness. It was about aesthetics. It was about control. And it always meant that I was the one who had to change, to adapt, to shrink, to fit into their perfectly balanced frame. It never, ever meant that they had to make room for me. It was a Tuesday, 9 days after Thanksgiving, when the package arrived. My executive assistant, Chloe, placed it on the solid walnut of my desk at Luminal HQ. It was a heavy, square box wrapped in thick, cream-colored paper addressed to me in Violet's looping, overly stylized cursive. Chloe, ever efficient, had already slit the tape. "This came by courier, Ms. Delaney. It feels like an invitation," she said. "Thank you, Chloe. Hold my calls for 30 minutes. She nodded and clicked the door shut, leaving me in the soundproof quiet of my office. The silence of this room was my sanctuary, a place where data made sense and outcomes were predictable. I slid the paper off the box. Inside, nested in black tissue, was a thick, leather-bound album. Embossed in gold leaf on the cover were 2 words, "The Delaney Thanksgiving." A cold, procedural stillness settled over me. This was it. Violet's timeless, neutral, consistent heirloom. I opened the cover. The paper was heavy, archival quality, the kind I paid for. The first spread was the main portrait, the grand posed shot by the fireplace. My father, Thomas, looking dignified. My mother, Margaret, radiant in her oatmeal cashmere. Violet looking ethereal, leaning into her husband, Grant. All of them bathed in the warm, professional light Evan Pike had so carefully constructed. All of them perfectly balanced. I looked for the space I had occupied. I knew exactly where I had been placed, on the far left, my shoulder almost grazing the stone. My slate blue dress, a solitary island of color in their sea of beige and olive. I was not there. It was not that the photo had been cropped to exclude me. It was that I had been removed. The stone of the fireplace continued seamlessly where my body had been. The antique Persian rug, whose pattern I had memorized during years of stilted conversations, was perfectly digitally recreated. The garland on the mantelpiece, which my left shoulder had partially obscured, now hung whole and uninterrupted. My breathing didn't hitch. I didn't gasp. A strange, metallic taste filled my mouth, the taste of adrenaline when it has nowhere to go. I turned the page. A candid shot, Violet and Grant laughing by the piano. My niece Clara telling a story, her hands animated. In the original moment, she had been telling the story to me. I had been sitting on the piano bench, leaning in, my head tilted. The photograph showed Clara laughing animatedly at a bright, hazy bloom of light, a sort of angelic overexposure where my head and shoulders should have been. They hadn't bothered to recreate the piano, they had just blurred me into a meaningless, aesthetically pleasing void. I flipped again. This one was the most meticulous. It was a shot of the dining room table just before we sat down. In the foreground, my hand, wearing the signet ring my grandfather, Harlan, had given me, rested on the back of my chair. Or it had. Now, the chair was empty. The deep red of the damask wallpaper pattern, which my hand and wrist had broken, was now perfectly, flawlessly continuous. They had rebuilt the wall, pixel by pixel. The eraser was seamless. The precision was almost devotional. It was the work of someone with a great deal of time, a steady hand, and a profound, intimate knowledge of Photoshop. This wasn't a last-minute tidy-up. This was a dedicated project. With each page, the blood in my veins seemed to cool, to thicken. The feeling in my stomach wasn't a drop in the emotional sense. It was a sudden, catastrophic failure of internal support. It was the feeling of a CEO looking at a balance sheet and realizing a foundational asset had been a complete fabrication. I closed the album. The heavy cover thudded shut, with a sound of expensive finality. I picked up my phone. My movements were measured, economical. I didn't call Violet. The artist is never the commissioner. I called my mother. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was a bright hello. Rowan. Darling, what a lovely surprise. Mom, I just received the Thanksgiving album, I said, my voice flat, a statement of fact. Oh, isn't it just beautiful, she gushed. Violet did such an incredible job curating it. It's so consistent, truly timeless. There it was, that word again. I noticed, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. That I'm not in any of the photographs. A beat of silence, not a guilty pause, but a brief computational lag, as if she were choosing from a menu of prepared responses. Oh, that, she said, her voice dismissive, airy, as if I'd pointed out a minor typo. Yes, we talked about that, darling. You know, we all agreed on an earth tone palette for the photos this year. Your dress, that lovely blue, it just threw the whole balance of the compositions. It was visually jarring. Asterisk we all agreed. Asterisk I had not agreed. I had not even been informed. So, you photoshopped me out. Don't be so dramatic, Rowan. It wasn't photoshopped out. It was just hided. Evan, the photographer, helped Violet make the frames more aesthetically consistent. It just looks cleaner. Darling, you have to admit, the neutral palette is so much more cohesive. She was lying. Evan Pike was a professional. He would never agree to such a profound breach of ethics. He'd crop. He'd color correct. But he wouldn't erase a person, and he certainly wouldn't have created that hazy, angelic blur where I'd been talking to my niece. That was pure amateurish Violet, trying to be artistic. My mother was implicating the photographer to validate the decision, to make it professional, not personal. I said nothing. I let the silence stretch. A tactic I used in negotiations when I wanted the other party to panic and fill the void. Margaret, who could not stand a vacuum, rushed to fill it. Honestly, Rowan, don't take it personally. It's just a photograph. It's about the family looking good as a whole. You, of all people, should understand branding. Don't take it personally. The sentence hung in the air between my 1000 noise-cancelling office window and the receiver of my phone. It was a scalpel. It was designed to cut, to sever, to finalize. It was the ultimate gaslighting, asterisk we have erased you. And your reaction to that erasure is the real problem. Asterisk my face, which I could see reflected in the dark screen of my secondary monitor, cooled. My expression settled into the neutral, unreadable mask I wore for quarterly earnings calls. The muscles in my jaw tightened, not in anger, but in resolution. The transition was complete. The part of me that had been daughter, that had been sister, that had been hoping for a different outcome, simply went offline. My face was now at CFO temperature. I see, I said. The words were an iceberg. Only the smallest fraction was visible. What lay beneath was vast, cold, and immensely powerful. Good, Margaret said, audibly relieved, mistaking my coldness for compliance. I'm so glad you understand now, darling. I was meaning to call you. Your father and I saw the most divine outdoor fire pit at the garden center, and I clicked the end call icon on my screen. I did not hang up on her. I terminated the data stream. I sat for a full minute. The rage I should have felt was absent. The grief I might have expected was not there. Instead, there was a profound, chilling clarity. They had, with meticulous effort, shown me exactly what I was worth to them. I was not a person. I was a line item, a variable, an aesthetic inconvenience. And when my presence no longer served their brand, I was to be tidied. I opened the album again, this time with a different purpose. I turned to the back flap, the little paper pocket where stationers put their business card. There was no business card. There was only a small silver USB drive tucked inside, the kind of drive Violet would buy. Branded with some high-end design logo, a label printed in her cursive font read, "Raws plus edits." She had included the evidence. The arrogance of it was breathtaking. She was so convinced of her own artistic rightness, so certain of my technological incompetence, that she had delivered the proof of her own malicious intent directly to my desk. She thought she was giving me a digital copy for my own files, never imagining I would look inside the folders, that I would understand the difference between a RAW file and a PSD. She had mistaken the person who funds the technology for someone who doesn't understand how to use it. I picked up the USB drive. It was cool to the touch. I did not take it to my workstation. Instead, I stood, walked out of my office, and past the marketing wing. I badged into the secure corridor that led to the Lumen Vale Product Development Labs. The air here was different. It was HEPA-filtered, cool, and smelled faintly of ozone and sterilized glass. This was where we formulated, where we tested, where we dealt in pure, unadulterated truth, where we separated base compounds from contaminants. I walked to an empty clean bench, a sterile stainless steel workstation under bright, unforgiving lights used for analyzing product stability. I did not see the album in my hand as nostalgia. I did not see the USB as a family memento. I saw them as evidence. I was carrying them into the lab the way a forensic scientist carries a sealed bag from a crime scene. I felt nothing. Nothing at all, except the clean, cold click of a switch flipping deep inside my mind. The daughter was gone, sent to an archived file. The operator was now in session. I did not use my own laptop. My personal and corporate devices were firewalled, secure, and sacred. To introduce an unknown USB drive, especially one from Violet, was a breach of protocol. Instead, I stood at the quarantined workstation in the R&D lab, a standalone terminal air-gapped from the Lumen Vale network. This machine was used for analyzing spectroscopic data from new compound batches, a place of pure objective truth. It was fitting. I slid the silver USB into the port. The machine was silent, designed for concentration, and the small click of the drive seating felt disproportionately loud, like a round being chambered. A window popped up. The drive was titled with her typical lack of subtlety, Thanksgiving. I clicked. The folder tree was simple, exactly as a professional photographer would have organized it, and exactly as a layperson would have failed to secure it. RAW, PSD, exports. My pulse remained steady. I was an operator, and this was data ingress. I bypassed the exports flash folder. I had already seen the finished, polished lie in the leather-bound album. I bypassed RAW, the folder of truth, saving it for control. I went straight to the crime scene, the PSD folder. The folder contained 28 files, all with Adobe Photoshop extensions. I sorted the list by date modified. Evan Pike, the photographer, would have done his initial color correction and delivered the files within days of the event. These files, however, showed a flurry of activity last night, and the owner tag associated with the most recent changes was not Evan Pike. It was Violet Design. Her arrogance was a physical weight in the room. She hadn't even bothered to cover her digital tracks. She had done the work on her own iMac, saved it, and copied the entire working directory, evidence and all, onto the drive. I opened the first file, Delaney Portrait Group 01.psd. The workstation's high memory RAM hummed, loading the massive file. It was over a gigabyte. This was no simple JPEG. This was the multi-layered, high-resolution scaffolding of the deception. The image appeared on the high-definition monitor, the perfect family portrait, the one with the seamless brick fireplace where I was supposed to be. I moved my cursor to the layers panel. And there it was, the entire confession written in the metadata. Evan's original work was a locked layer at the bottom labeled Base I Pike. It was clean, professional. Above it, a layer group titled Global Palette. I clicked the small eye icon to deactivate it. The image instantly warmed. The drab, neutral beige and olive filter vanished. In its place, the original colors bloomed, my slate blue dress, the rich cranberry of the floral arrangements, the healthy, normal flush in everyone's skin. She had literally digitally bled the life out of the image to fit her aesthetic. I reactivated the layer and moved to the next group, the one that made my blood run cold. It was titled simply Erase R. My stomach did not drop. My hands did not shake. I simply observed, as if analyzing a rival's formula. It was a folder containing 15 separate layers. I toggled the group's visibility. Click. I was gone. Click. I was back. The fireplace, the rug, the garland, my body, my face, my dress. I expanded the folder. The layer names were a brutalist poem of intent. Fill brick clone stamp rug L rebuild garland edge mask a final soften edge. This was not a tidy up. This was not an aesthetic consistency edit. This was a targeted, meticulous, and time-consuming manual eraser. This was the digital equivalent of hiring a hitman. The work itself was decent, amateur but dedicated. The contentaware fill was clumsy in places, the clone stamping repetitive if you knew where to look, but to the naked eye, it was seamless. I closed the PSD file without saving. I opened the RAW folder. I opened the corresponding file, EP4593.cr3. The Canon RAW file loaded, and there I was, standing on the edge, as I remembered. My dress blue, my smile tight, my eyes clear. I was there. The metadata on the sidecar file confirmed it, captured by Evan Pike, lens data, aperture settings, and crucially, 0 edits originating from Violet Design. The RAWs were clean. Evan had delivered the truth. My mother and sister had conspired to manufacture the lie. Margaret's claim that Evan helped tidy was a direct, provable falsehood. I had the asterisk what asterisk and the asterisk how star. Now I needed the asterisk why star. This was too much work to be just about a visually jarring dress. This was motivated. I left the lab, the USB drive in my pocket. I returned to my office, the soundproof sanctuary, and sat at my own terminal. I plugged the drive into a secure external reader and navigated, this time to my web browser. I opened Instagram. Violet's feed was, as always, a monument to curated perfection. Beige linen, oatmeal lattes, soft focus shots of her daughter, Clara, in neutral-toned overalls. Her latest post, from 12 hours ago, was a slideshow, the cleansed Thanksgiving photos, the portrait without me, the candid shot of Clara laughing at the angelic, blurry void. The caption was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive branding. So incredibly blessed this Thanksgiving to be surrounded by family that is so perfect, so timeless, and above all, so consistent. Building a legacy one neutral-toned moment at a time. Hashtag family goals hashtag timeless. Delaney legacy, neutral aesthetic. The comments were a waterfall of gushing praise. This is the most perfect family I have ever seen. Aesthetic goals. That fireplace shot is everything. Violet, you are the queen of timeless. So cohesive. My family could never. You guys are literal perfection. They were praising her act of erasure as a high-concept artistic choice. The perfect family was the one I was not in. I felt a cold, clean line of focus descend. This wasn't just social media pining. This was a product launch. I looked at her bio link. It wasn't her usual blog. It was a link to a professional pitch deck hosted on a subscription site, The Delaney Legacy, a modern guide to timeless living. I clicked. It was a fully realized proposal for a family lifestyle micro-series, a reality show, a brand partnership. It described the Delaney family, Thomas, the dignified patriarch, Margaret, the graceful matriarch, Violet and Grant, the stylish modern couple, as the arbiters of a new traditional lifestyle. And the deck's key art, its primary visual evidence of their brand, was the Thanksgiving photo set, the erased set. The motive clicked into place, sharp and brutal. I wasn't erased because my dress clashed. I was erased because I clashed. I was the single, the divorced CEO mother. I was the founder of a high-gloss, aggressive, colorful beauty brand. I was the slate blue dress in their beige world. I didn't fit the timeless, neutral brand they were trying to sell. I was a narrative problem. And they had solved it with a layer mask. They weren't just erasing me from an album. They were erasing me from their business plan. My hands moved with swift, economical precision. I was no longer in the lab. But the forensic analysis continued. I opened Adobe Premiere on my workstation. I imported the raw file, EP4593.cr3, and the corresponding final export, Thanksgiving Portrait Group 01.jpg. I placed them on two video tracks, one directly above the other. I set the top layer's opacity to flicker, toggling from 100% to 0 once every second. The result was irrefutable, a blinking, damning comparison. Me present. Me gone. Me present. Me gone. It was the most violent, silent footage I had ever seen. I exported the raw comparison. Blink.mp4. Next, I opened a secure memo. I addressed it to my corporate counsel, Bracken Alder LLP. Subject: urgent confidential misappropriation of likeness, false light, and defamation by implication. To counsel, I wrote, my fingers flying across the keys. This morning, I received evidence of the willful and malicious alteration of professional photographs in which I am present. These images have been digitally manipulated to erase my likeness entirely. These cleansed images are now being actively used in a commercial pitch deck, see attached, to monetize a family brand from which I have been explicitly excluded. This action constitutes defamation by implication, suggesting my presence is undesirable or shameful, and gross misappropriation of the original unaltered images, for which I hold partial usage rights. While that file uploaded, I pinged the head of brand safety at Luminal via our secure internal chat. Sam, I typed. I am handling a personal legal matter that may generate reputational blowback. I need you to quietly prepare a reputational firewall. Monitor for any chatter linking Lumen Vale, or my name to a Delaney Legacy brand, or any related lifestyle content. The only public stance, if it ever comes to that, is that Lumen Vale is not affiliated in any way. This is containment only. Do not engage. Just build the wall. He replied instantly, understood. Wall going up. Finally, I compiled all of it. The raw folder, the PSD folder with its damning layer names, the exported exports, JPEGs, the screenshots of Violet's Instagram, and the downloaded PDF of her pitch deck, the blinking comparison video. I bundled them into a single compressed file. I encrypted it with a 256-bit key. I opened my private digital vault, the off-site, triple redundant server where I keep my most critical documents, Miora's trust, my will, the original source code for our breakout serum. I created a new directory. I uploaded the encrypted file. I labeled it Frame 1. I leaned back in my chair. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a glacial calm. I thought of the word *family star. I had always seen it as a bond, a biological and emotional contract. I realized I had been wrong. I had been treating it as a relationship, when they had been treating it as a trademark. And I had just discovered an infringing product. The word *family* no longer felt like a bond. It felt like a pending trademark dispute. And I was about to file my opposition. The vault confirmation dialog glowed on the screen. Frame 01 was secure. On my other monitor, the file I had made, comparison_blink.mp4, played on a silent, relentless loop. Me present in slate blue, my smile tight. Me gone, replaced by digital brick and flawless wallpaper. Present, gone. The rhythmic flicker was hypnotic. It was the digital heartbeat of their decision. And as I watched my own image toggle between existence and erasure, I realized my earlier assessment was wrong. This wasn't an attack. It wasn't a fit of pique. This was a corporate rebranding. This was a calculated business decision. The locked cabinet in my mind, the one I'd been filing small cuts into for decades, swung wide open. The cold, hard data of the past came rushing in to meet the damning evidence of the present. This wasn't the first eraser. It was just the first one they documented in a Photoshop file. The montage began. Unbidden. 8 years ago. My marriage was disintegrating in a way that was both spectacularly fast and agonizingly slow. Mira was not yet 2. My ex-husband, a man who loved the idea of a startup founder, but buckled under the reality of the 90-hour work weeks, had emptied our joint savings, and left a note on the kitchen counter. I was sitting on the floor of our half-empty rental apartment, surrounded by boxes I couldn't afford to move, trying to calculate if I could make payroll for the 5 employees who depended on me and buy diapers for my daughter. I was 36 hours without sleep. I was broken, and I did something I rarely do. I called my mother. I was crying, a dry, racking sound that hurt my chest. I explained in clipped, humiliated sentences that he was gone and the money was gone. The silence on the other end of the line was not empathetic. It was not a gathering of comfort. It was the sound of a judge donning her black cap. Well, Rowan. Margaret's voice finally came. Each word a perfectly chilled, perfectly sharp icicle. We told you so. We always said he was unstable. That he lacked character. You made your bed, darling. You'll simply have to find a way to lie in it. A click, she hung up. Help never came. No offer to watch Mira. No check to cover the rent. Not even a casserole. I received only the cold, hard validation of their lowest expectations for me. I secured a bridge loan from a second-tier lender at a predatory interest rate, sold my car, and kept Lumen Vale alive by inches. I did not cry again. Then, 2 years later, the breakout. Our Aurelia peptide serum went viral. It wasn't luck. It was the culmination of 3 years of clinical trials, a revolutionary stabilization process, and a marketing campaign I had practically bled for. We weren't just a startup anymore. We were a brand. We were in every major publication. We were anchoring Sephira's new clean clinical vertical. My name, Rowan Delaney, was on a Forbes cover, not as an analyst, but as a founder. And the family dynamic, which had been frozen for years in polite, judgmental disapproval, instantly recalibrated. The prodigal daughter, who had made her bed, was suddenly, miraculously rebranded. I was no longer the impulsive fool who married badly and worked too hard. I was their greatest success. I was, in short, their ATM. It started with a finesse that I had to, on some level, admire. Darling, Margaret cooed over the phone one Tuesday, her voice bubbling with a warmth I hadn't heard since childhood. It is just so natural to want to help your family, isn't it? Now that you're so wonderfully successful, we are all just so proud. Natural was the justification. Proud was the password. Help was the key that unlocked the vault. A week later, the first forwarded email arrived. It was an invoice from the Riverton Heights florist for the annual club luncheon. They do the most divine arrangements. Rowan, my mother wrote in the body of the email. Aren't they lovely? The club's budget is just so terribly tight this year. And as event chair, I paid it. Then came the invoices for the roof repairs on the Riverton house. A dreadful storm, darling, and the insurance is just being impossible. We have to maintain the integrity of the house. It's our legacy. I paid. Then I underwrote the tradition of Thanksgiving, which I now understood was just a catering and florist bill I was expected to absorb. My father, Thomas, was less subtle. He performed his dignified silence as a kind of passive leverage. He called me, a rare event in itself, to talk about his dream. His dream, it turned out, was a black Cadillac Escalade. Top of the line, pearl black paint. It's a car a man of my station should be driving. Rowan, he'd said, his voice heavy with the implication of his disappointment. It's what people expect to see when I pull up to the club. It would be a fine gesture of filial respect. Filial respect was the invoice. I understood the language perfectly. I arranged the lease. The monthly payment was astronomical. I was not a fool. I wasn't blinded by a sudden influx of familial love. I paid for one reason and one reason only, risk management. I was no longer just Rowan Delaney, the daughter. I was Rowan Delaney, the CEO and face of Luminal Beauty, a rapidly scaling corporation built on transparency, empowerment, and authenticity. I had investors. I had a board of directors. I had a public image that was inextricably tied to the brand's value. And scandal is expensive. The math was cold, simple, and undeniable. A disgruntled family airing its grievances in public. A father complaining to a local gossip columnist that his Forbes cover daughter wouldn't help him maintain his station. The reputational damage would be immediate and catastrophic. It would taint my brand. It would spook investors. Silence was cheaper. Paying their bills was a line item in my personal budget, filed under brand safety or reputational shielding. I wasn't paying for their lives. I was paying to protect mine. And my payments did not just maintain the Riverton facade. They funded Violet. While I had been risking my last dollar on clinical trials, Violet was attending a 6-month dance intensive in Barcelona. When that ambition faded, it was a luxury design boot camp in Copenhagen. Her endless series of boutique business launches, a letterpress stationery company that lasted one holiday season, a curated home goods import business that never got out of customs, a brief foray into hand-hammered jewelry, all launched with breezy artistic enthusiasm and quietly folded 6 months later. Each one was propped up by a loan from me. A loan we both knew, wordlessly, was a gift. I was funding her failures. I was underwriting her aesthetic. I was, in fact, paying for the very timeless, neutral lifestyle she was now attempting to package and sell by photoshopping me out of the picture. I minimized the blinking comparison video. My hands were steady. I opened a different file on my encrypted drive. Not the vault, but my personal workstation. It was a simple, elegant spreadsheet. I had created it 4 years ago, the night I agreed to the Escalade. The title of the document was Lifelines. It wasn't a budget. It was a ledger. It was the only place in the entire world where the raw, unvarnished truth of my family's dynamic lived, tracked in precise, unforgiving numbers. Column A, date initiated. Column B, P. Thomas Delaney, Margaret Delaney, Violet Delaney, Grant, Riverton Heights Country Club, Lexus Financial Services. Column C, description, mortgage offset, Riverton HOA, club dues, Escalade note, landscaping, event sponsorship, Violet Design subsidy. Column D, frequency, monthly. Column E, amount. Column F, control, autopay toggle, active. It was all there. The underwriting of Thanksgiving, the loans to Violet, which I'd routinized into a monthly subsidy, the gesture of filial respect for the Escalade, the monthly landscaping sponsorship that, as my mother's forwarded emails confirmed, always magically included the budget for a party tent for one of her social functions, the umbrella insurance policy they were all listed under for a discount. I looked at the grand total at the bottom, the six-figure sum I transferred from my accounts to theirs year after year. Then I looked back at the file from the USB drive, PSD_arrays are. They had done their own math. They had calculated that the potential value of their perfect neutral brand, with me fully erased, was higher than the guaranteed, substantial value of the lifelines I provided. Or, more likely, they simply believed they were entitled to both my money and my absence. In that cold, clean, silent office, the realization crystallized, sharp as a shard of glass: they don't love me. They don't even like me. They love the lifelines. They love the infrastructure I provide. They love the auto payments. They love the soft landings, the Escalade, the club dues, the risk-free existence. They love the life support. They just can't stand the life attached to it. My hand moved to the mouse. My cursor hovered over column F in the Lifelines ledger. This spreadsheet wasn't just a record. It was a control panel. I saw each active toggle, each bright green button that signified a flow of my capital, my work, my risk into their lives. I looked at the line item Escalade note. I looked at Violet design subsidy. I looked at Riverton HOA club dues. My hand was perfectly steady. I felt like a surgeon, my pin hovering over the arterial clips before a necessary and radical amputation. The patient was toxic. The limb was gangrenous. This procedure wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of survival. My decision resolved, settling into my bones with the weight of cold steel. They had made a business decision. Now I would make mine. They had, with meticulous, devotional care, removed me from their frame. I would remove the frame from their world. The digital spreadsheet, Lifelines, was no longer a secret ledger of grievances. It was a control panel. In the deep, tomb-like quiet of my office after midnight, the screen cast a pale blue glow on my face. The rows of recurring payments, which had for years represented a slow, constant bleeding, now looked like a series of circuit breakers, and I was about to trip every single one. My movements were devoid of emotion. I was an operator executing a predetermined sequence. I opened a new browser window and navigated to the online portal for Lexus Financial Services. The login credentials were saved in my secure keychain. Auto-filled. Welcome, Rowan D. I navigated to the Scheduled Payments tab. There it was. The monthly debit of $1,872 for 4 years for a 2023 Cadillac Escalade ESV. Then ending in 8F127. My father's gesture of filial respect. I clicked Manage Payment. The option I wanted was not skip a payment or change amount. It was a small, unassuming link at the bottom of the page. Cancel autopay, a payoff vehicle. I clicked the first half of that option. A confirmation dialog box appeared in its stark, sans serif font, a digital barrier to impulsivity. Are you sure you want to cancel this scheduled automatic payment? This action cannot be undone through the online portal. My finger was steady on the mouse. There was no hesitation, no final pang of sentimentality. The screen refreshed. A green check mark appeared. Your automatic payment has been cancelled. One circuit was broken. The Escalade was no longer my responsibility. How my father would make the next payment, due in 8 days, was a data point that no longer belonged on my spreadsheet. I updated the corresponding cell in Lifelines. Column F, active, became cancelled. Next, Violet. I logged into my personal wealth management account, the one I used for investments and high-yield savings. From here, I administered the monthly design subsidy that I now understood was the seed money for my own erasure. It was disguised as a recurring Zelle payment, but its origin was this account. It was a direct offset for the mortgage on the trendy little bungalow she and Grant had purchased, a home they could not afford on his salary alone. I found the recurring transfer. The name Violet Delaney Grant stared back at me. The amount was substantial, a lifeline that allowed her to live the life of an influencer without the messy business of actually influencing anyone to buy anything. I clicked Delete Recurring Transfer. Another confirmation box. This will permanently terminate the scheduled monthly transfer to Violet Delaney Grant. Do you wish to proceed? The word *terminate* was perfect. It was a corporate word, clean and final. It was the word a company uses when a division is no longer profitable. I clicked Proceed. A chill, pure clarity washed over me. It was not the heat of anger, but the cold of a system being purged. It was the clean, quiet hum of a server after a corrupted file has been permanently deleted. I updated the spreadsheet. Violet Design Subsidy, terminated. Next, my parents' social standing. I navigated to the payment portal for the Riverton Heights Homeowners Association and the separate, more arcane system for the Riverton Heights Country Club. The dues were bundled, a single, cripplingly expensive payment that ensured my parents' place in the local aristocracy. It ensured my mother's chair on the charity committee and my father's preferred tea time. I cancelled the payment. This one felt different. It was quieter. The Escalade was a tangible object. Violet's subsidy was a direct funding of the betrayal. This was the cancellation of an idea, the idea of the Delaney legacy, of their unassailable position in the community, an idea that had been paid for month after month with my labor. A quiet, internal voice, one that sounded more like my own than it had in years, simply said, enough. I updated the spreadsheet. Riverton HOA Club dues, ended. The primary lifelines were now severed. Now it was time to dismantle the ancillary infrastructure. I opened my corporate email. I drafted a message to my head of compliance and my CFO. Subject: immediate revocation of ancillary corporate account privileges. Sam, Maria, I wrote, effective immediately. Please revoke all privileges for the following supplementary cardholders on the Lumen Vale Corporate Rewards account. Margaret Delaney, Thomas Delaney, Violet Delaney Grant. As per review of our T&D policy, their usage does not align with corporate business objectives. Please confirm once actioned. This was not a personal request. It was a matter of corporate governance. The cards, which I had extended to them years ago as a perk, were used for flights, hotels, and dinners, all under the guise of family travel, all generating rewards points that I, in turn, never used. My compliance officer, a man who viewed the world through the pristine lens of SEC regulations, would see this not as a family dispute, but as the closing of a potential liability loophole. He would sign off without question. I hit send. Next, the more insidious payments. I searched my email archives for the phrase landscaping sponsorship, the term my mother had coined for her regular infusions of cash for the Riverton house's upkeep. I found the most recent one, a forwarded invoice from a high-end event company. As always, tucked into the line items for lawn aeration and seasonal planting was the rental fee for a 40 by 60 foot party tent. I saved the email chain as a PDF. I logged into my bank account and cancelled the recurring wire transfer. Attaching the PDF to the internal note on the cancellation order, a small, precise piece of evidence for the file. Then the umbrella insurance policy. I had added them to my personal multi-million-dollar policy years ago to give them an absurd level of liability coverage at a fraction of the market price. It was a safety net woven from my success. I drafted a short, formal email to my insurance broker. Please remove all additional family members from my personal umbrella policy, effective immediately. Please confirm the change in premium once this is complete. The infrastructure was being dismantled piece by piece. But cutting them off was not enough. They needed to know why. And they needed to know it in a way that was documented, official, and legally airtight. I created a new, temporary email address. I drafted a single, clear message and addressed it to my parents, my sister, and my mother's family attorney, whose contact information I had from a long-ago property discussion. Subject: formal notice of discontinuation of all personal financial subsidies. To whom it may concern, the email began. Please be advised that effective immediately, Tuesday, December 5th, all personal, non-contractual financial subsidies, payments, and account privileges originating from me have been discontinued. This includes, but is not limited to, all previously established recurring transfers, loan payments, and expense account access. All future financial arrangements will require formal written contracts. No further correspondence will be answered on this matter through this channel. It was cold, corporate, and irrefutable. They could not claim they were not warned. They could not feign ignorance. My next email was to my own legal team. I forwarded the encrypted link to Frame 1 to the senior litigation partner at Bracken Alder. David, I wrote, the file and the link is the evidence I mentioned. I want cease and desist letters drafted and prepared for service. Targets are Violet Delaney Grant and Margaret Delaney. Grounds are unlawful use of likeness, false light, and tortious interference with business prospects. Do not send yet. Await my command. I also need you to begin drafting a civil complaint. Finally, the most critical step. This was no longer just a family matter. It was a potential threat to my company. I had to get ahead of it at the highest level. I opened my calendar. I created an invitation for 7 a.m. the next morning. I invited the 4 other members of the Lumen Vale Board of Directors. It was an emergency meeting. Subject: Mandatory Board Executive Session. Title: Related Party Transactions Review. In the body, I wrote only one line: a matter requiring the board's immediate attention regarding fiduciary duty and brand integrity has arisen. Attendance is mandatory. This move was strategic. It framed the entire situation not as a personal vendetta, but as a CEO taking decisive action to protect the corporation. I was controlling the narrative before it had a chance to exist. When my family inevitably tried to spin this as me being cruel and vindictive, I would already have the full backing of my board, who would see it as a necessary firewalling of the company from a clear and present reputational risk. I sent the invitation. It was 3:17 a.m. I leaned back, the leather of my chair creaking in the silent room. The Lifeline spreadsheet was a sea of red: cancelled, terminated, ended. The circuits were all broken. The power was cut. I shut down my computer. The office plunged into darkness, the only light coming from the distant, sleeping city. I walked through the empty headquarters, my heels clicking on the polished concrete floors. The building was a testament to what I had built. Alone. I drove home. I did not check my phone. I did not feel rage. I did not feel sadness. I felt a profound, bone-deep quiet. I got into bed and fell asleep instantly, a deep, dreamless sleep. I slept for exactly 4 hours and woke just before dawn, not with a jolt of anxiety, but with the clean, hollow fatigue of a sprint well run. The work was done. The system was purged, and now all I had to do was wait for the screams to begin. The board executive session was over by 7:45. It was, as I had predicted, bloodless. I did not present an emotional grievance. I presented a risk analysis. I laid out the facts. A related party, my sister Violet, was attempting to launch a commercial brand using misappropriated and maliciously altered images, creating a false light representation that could, if linked to me, damage Lumen Vale's brand integrity. I did not mention the eraser. I simply framed it as a likeness dispute and intellectual property issue with a non-compliant family member. The board, a collection of venture capitalists and industry veterans who live and die by risk mitigation, was unanimous. They passed a resolution prepared by my counsel, formally insulating the company from any and all non-contractual related party dealings, and authorizing me to use all necessary corporate legal resources to protect the company's brand, and by extension, my own, from misappropriation or false light claims. I had my corporate armor. I had their full, documented, mandated support. I was no longer just a daughter. I was a CEO acting on a board directive. I returned to my office. Chloe held a stack of call slips. "Your mother has called 6 times, Ms. Delaney. She said it was an emergency." "Thank you, Chloe. Hold all calls as planned. I'm working on the Q1 projections." "Of course," she said, disappearing soundlessly. The first domino had already fallen. I knew Margaret's emergency was not a health crisis. It was a social one. At 9:15 a.m., she would have been at the Riverton Club, presiding over the charity committee luncheon, the luncheon I had, for the past 5 years, unknowingly sponsored via the bundled HOA a club dues payment. When the club manager politely informed her that the Delaney family membership had been suspended that morning, effective immediately, for non-payment, the emergency would have begun. Her social standing, a construct built entirely on my money and her own ruthlessness, had evaporated between the soup and salad courses. The second domino fell at 10:28 a.m. My phone screen, down on my desk, lit up with the family group chat. A thread I kept perpetually muted. I glanced at the notifications stacking on the lock screen. "Violet, my card was just declined at the Design Emporium. Fix this." "Violet, this isn't funny." "Rowan, my card for the mortgage, the bank just sent an alert. Insufficient funds." "Mother, they have suspended my membership. They are claiming non-payment. This is a grotesque humiliation." "Mother, Rowan Delaney, you answer this phone. There is a catastrophic administrative error with your accounts." Administrative error. The clinical, impersonal term for me. I was not a person. I was an administrative function, one that was now, to their horror, offline. The third and loudest domino fell at 11:15 a.m. A text from my father, a man who had sent me perhaps 20 texts in my entire life. Most of them, "Okay, father. A tow truck is at the club. They are attempting to repossess the Escalade from the front entrance. Call them." He didn't text *call me star. He texted *call them *, the anonymous financial entity that, in his mind, I controlled. I pictured the scene, the polite, unavoidable repo agent, clipboard in hand, speaking in the calm, unassailable language of default. The polished pearl-black gesture of filial respect being hitched and dragged out of the club's pristine circular drive in front of his peers. This was not just an inconvenience. It was a public execution of his station. The family group chat ignited. "Mother, a repo man at the club. Thomas is being humiliated. Violet, what did you do? Violet, what did you do? Mother, Rowan, this has gone beyond a simple mistake. This is monstrous. You are destroying this family. Violet, I'll call the bank. I'll fix it. Just give me the account password, Rowan. Give it to me. Mother, Rowan, fix this." The command was stark and clear. Fix this. The entitlement was so pure, so reflexive. It was almost beautiful. They had erased me from their reality. And yet, they demanded I continue to finance it. I did not reply. I let the digital screams echo in the void. Then the voicemails began. My phone's visual voicemail log became a real-time transcript of their entire emotional collapse. A perfect case study in the 5 stages of entitled grief. First, fury. Margaret, Rowan. This is your mother. A dreadful error has occurred at the club. They are claiming my dues have lapsed. You need to call the bank immediately and rectify this. It is humiliating. Call me the instant you receive this. Tone, icy, inconvenienced, a command to a subordinate. 10:35 a.m. Violet, I don't know what kind of sick, petty game you're playing, but my cards are all declined. All of them. The subsidy. Rowan, it's not there. The mortgage payment is due. You are ruining my life. Fix it. Fix it now. Tone. Hysterical. Sharp. Accusatory. 11:19 a.m. Thomas, Rowan, they are taking the Escalade. They took it from the club. You will rectify this. This is an unbelievable humiliation. Tone, shaking. Stunned. A deep, wounded pride. Then bargaining. 1:47 p.m. Margaret, Rowan. Darling, please call me. There has been a terrible misunderstanding. I'm sure we can sort this out. This is not like you. Just call me. We can talk. Perhaps we can discuss the album. I'm sure Violet didn't mean. Tone, false warmth. The first crack in the armor. A clumsy attempt at negotiation. 3:22 p.m. Violet, Rowan, please. Please pick up. I don't understand what's happening. The mortgage. Rowan, the bank is calling me. I'll fix the photos. Okay. I'll put you back in. I'll put you in all of them. I can make you a whole new album. Just turn the money back on, please. Tone, open. Desperate begging. A purely transactional apology. She would unerase me in exchange for the lifelines. Finally, despair. 5:01 p.m. Margaret, you've done it. You've actually done it. After everything we gave you, you are an ungrateful, vile child. You have destroyed your father. You have destroyed this family. You will be sorry for this. Rowan, you will be utterly alone. Tone, a low, defeated, venomous hiss, the sound of a queen who has just realized she's in checkmate. I read the transcripts, my face cool. I saved them all. As the private channels went unanswered, Violet defaulted to her only other weapon, her public. At 6 p.m. My head of brand safety pinged me. Subject, heads up. Violet Delaney Grant is now public. He attached a screenshot. It was a new Instagram story from Violet. A black and white, artfully tear-streaked photo of her looking out a rain-streaked window. The text overlay was pure weaponized victimhood. It's a dark day when you are punished for pursuing art and trying to protect a beautiful, consistent legacy. Some people just don't understand the vision. She was spinning it. She was positioning herself as the artist, the curator of a beautiful legacy, and me as the hateful, punitive force. The comments on her last post, the erased slideshow, began to split. Some of her followers offered sympathy. A few, however, were asking the questions I knew would come. What do you mean punished? Wait, where is your sister in these? A minor gossip account. One that tracked local influencers, picked it up. Drama in Riverton, influencer Violet Delaney claims she's being punished for art just days after posting perfect family photos. Are the two related? What's the tea? My PR team, acting on my earlier instructions, was already moving. They quietly flagged Violet's post to Instagram's content moderation team as manipulated media and false representation. They did not engage. They did not comment. They simply used the corporate tools I had at my disposal. And then, at 6:34 a.m., the one variable I had not and could not have predicted entered the equation. A new message arrived. Not a text, not a voicemail. It was a direct message on my personal, rarely used Instagram account. The name on the profile picture made my blood turn to ice. Evan Pike, professional photographer. My heart, which had been beating at a calm, executive rhythm all day, gave a single hard thump. This was it. I opened the message. Ms. Delaney Rowan. Evan Pike here. I was the photographer for your family's Thanksgiving. I've just been made aware of a post on your sister Violet's Instagram, and I am seeing some comments that imply I was the one who erased you from those family portraits. I want to be unequivocally clear. I did not and would never perform such a malicious and unethical alteration. My contract was to capture the event and provide standard professional color correction. I delivered the full set of clean, unaltered RAWs and JPEGs to your sister, Violet, for your mother. Margaret's specific written instruction. Margaret told me Violet was handling the album herself. The edits made to those photos are fraudulent, a complete misrepresentation of my work, and I will not have my professional name attached to them. I have the email chain with your mother's instructions. I am prepared to sign a sworn declaration to this effect. This is an egregious breach, and I am so sorry you were the victim of it. I read the message once, twice. A cold, bright, victorious fire bloomed in my chest. He had the receipts. He had the email chain from Margaret. He wasn't just a witness. He was the key to the entire case. He locked the chain of custody. I screenshot the DM. I immediately forwarded it, along with the gossip account links, to my legal team. David, I wrote, the game has just changed. Get a declaration from this man. Get it notarized tonight by 9 p.m. I had it. A PDF in my inbox. Declaration of Evan Pike.pdf. It was a sworn statement signed under penalty of perjury, detailing my mother's instruction and confirming Violet's sole responsibility for the malicious and fraudulent alterations. I now had the *what*, the PSDs, the *how*, the layers, the *y*, the pitch deck, the consequences, the voicemails, and the proof, Evan's declaration. I could have released it. I could have sent the declaration to every gossip blog, posted the blinking comparison video, and annihilated Violet's influencer career in a single fiery post. But timing is a weapon, and a weapon is only effective when deployed at the moment of maximum impact. This was not the moment. I drafted a measured statement, the one I had been preparing in my mind, factual, cold, and armed with Evan's testimony. I saved it to my desktop. Gala_statement_draft_vx.docx. I did not send it. Instead, I opened my encrypted vault. I created a new folder. I labeled it Frame 02. I uploaded the PDF of Evan Pike's sworn declaration. I uploaded the digital audio files of the 6 voicemails. I uploaded the screenshots of the family group chat, of Violet's punished for art story, and of the gossip blog's post. I added the bank records confirming the exact date and time of the lifeline terminations. The file was complete. The case was locked. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for them to walk into it. The silence lasted for 27 hours. It was a loaded, humming silence, the kind that precedes a market correction or a storm front. I used the time to work. I finalized the Q1 projections, held 3 back-to-back meetings on our new European logistics chain, and had dinner with Mira. A bright, uncomplicated bubble of time, where the only thing that mattered was her detailed explanation of the social hierarchy of 4th grade soccer. For those 2 hours, I was not an operator or a CEO. I was just Mom. It was the only real thing left. The next morning, a letter arrived at my office via messenger. It was not from my family. It was from their legal representation, a firm called Finch Associates, a name that sounded more suited to small-town probate than corporate warfare. The paper was thick, cream-colored bond, the kind meant to convey old money seriousness. It was a performance, just like everything else they did. The letter was a masterpiece of blustering incompetence. It was a legal chess move played by someone who only knew how to play checkers. It demanded, in laughably feudal language, the immediate and unconditional reinstatement of all long-standing uncustomary familial support. It referred to my actions as a shocking and unnatural dereliction of filial duty. And then, in the 3rd paragraph, came the threat, the emotional landmine they thought was their trump card. Should you fail to rectify this callous abandonment, the letter read, our client, Mrs. Margaret Delaney, will be left with no choice but to explore all available avenues to protect her family's good name, including sharing the deeply painful story of this elder abandonment with media outlets who specialize in stories of this delicate nature. They were going to tell all to the tabloids. It was the move of a cornered, panicked amateur. They were threatening to detonate a bomb in a house they didn't realize was made of glass. I did not feel fear. I felt a profound sense of pity, which was somehow more insulting. I scanned the letter into a PDF, attached it to an email, and sent it to David at Bracken Alder. My only comment was, as predicted, please proceed. The counteroffensive was launched within the hour. The letter from Bracken Alder was not on cream-colored bond. It was a digital communication, a lethal data payload delivered to Arthur Finch's inbox. It was a surgical strike. David's response did not engage with their emotional, pseudo-legal arguments. It simply fired back with a formal notice of claims. It was a declaration of war. It cited, with chilling specificity, the evidence contained in my encrypted vaults. It referenced a sworn, notarized declaration from the event photographer, Mr. Evan Pike, confirming that all malicious and fraudulent digital alterations were performed by Violet Delaney Grant under the direction of Margaret Delaney. It laid out the impending claims, misappropriation of likeness for commercial gain, referencing the Delaney legacy pitch deck, false light for creating a narrative that implied my presence was shameful or undesirable, and unlawful use of likeness, citing their use of the altered images without my consent. It concluded with my demands, which were not a negotiation, but a list of terms for their unconditional surrender, the immediate and permanent removal of all altered Thanksgiving photographs from all social media platforms, websites, and digital or physical marketing materials, the public posting on Violet Delaney Grant's Instagram account of the full, unaltered set of original photographs, to remain publicly visible for a period of no less than 90 days, the cessation of any and all attempts to monetize the Delaney name or brand in any commercial context without my express, written, and revocable consent. I had given David one final, crucial instruction. David, I'd said on the phone, I want it made clear. There will be no private settlement. There will be no non-disclosure agreements. There will be no exchange of money. They have 2 choices. They can correct the record publicly on their own, or they can face us in discovery. That's it. It was the most brutal choice I could give them. They could either endure the quiet, controlled humiliation of admitting their own lie, or they could face the public, systematic annihilation of having every text message, every bank statement, every email related to this affair subpoenaed and entered into the public record. Their bluff had been called with a nuclear submarine. Now, we waited. The next move, however, came from a direction I had not anticipated. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, my private line rang. It was an unlisted number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some instinct made me answer. Rowan Delaney. The voice on the other end was thin, raspy, but carried an echo of old authority. Rowan. It's Harlan. Harlan Delaney. My grandfather. My father's father, 83 years old, a man who had built a small manufacturing empire and then watched, in what I could only imagine, was quiet despair, as his son Thomas managed it into genteel stagnation. He had been a peripheral figure in my life for years, a ghost at Christmas and Easter, observing the family tableau from a distance. Grandfather, I said, my voice betraying a flicker of surprise. I need to see you, he said. There was no preamble. Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock. The library at the Union Club. Alone. The Union Club was his place, a quiet, wood-paneled institution downtown, a world away from the bright, vacuous chatter of the Riverton Heights Country Club. I'll be there, I said. The next morning, I found him in a deep leather armchair, a cup of black tea steaming at his elbow. He looked frail, the skin on his hands as thin as parchment, but his eyes were the same sharp, assessing blue I remembered from childhood. He did not rise. He simply gestured to the chair opposite him. Tell me what happened, he said. I did not give him the story of a wronged daughter. I gave him the dispassionate briefing of a CEO. I laid out the timeline, the discovery of the album, the forensic analysis of the Photoshop files, the business motivation behind the erasure, the financial lifelines I had been providing, and the steps I had taken to sever them. I spoke for 15 minutes without interruption. When I was finished, I took out my tablet. This, I said, is the final file from the photographer's camera. I showed him the unaltered family portrait. And this is the version my sister is using to pitch a TV show. I played the blinking comparison video. Comparison_blink.mp4. Me present. Me gone. Present. Gone. He watched the screen. His face unreadable. He did not flinch. He did not gasp. But I saw his hand, the one resting on the arm of the chair, begin to tremble. It was a small, almost imperceptible tremor, the only sign of the earthquake happening within him. He watched the loop play 5 times. Then he said, his voice a low rasp, "Stop it." I stopped the video. He looked out the tall library window for a long moment at the grey city sky. When I created the primary family trust, he began, his voice distant, my lawyer, a sensible man, advised me against it. He wanted everything in neat, predictable percentages, but I insisted on a discretionary clause. I called it the heart clause. It gave the trustee, me, until I die, the power to completely reallocate the principal and all assets in the event of. And I remember the wording exactly, acts of knowing erasure, or profound coercion, that caused the Delaney name to forget its heart. He turned his sharp blue eyes back to me. What your mother and sister have done is not a matter of aesthetics. It is a matter of the heart. They have chosen image over person. That is the definition of a counterfeit legacy. He leaned forward, his tremor subsiding, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I want the evidence packet, Rowan. Everything. The raw files, the lawyer's letters, the photographer's statement. I want the vault. I nodded. I took out my phone. And right there, in the quiet of the Union Club library, I composed an email to his private address. I sent him the secure, time-limited access keys to frame 01 and frame 02. He watched the secure confirmation pop up on my screen. He gave a single, sharp nod. Then he did something that seemed both ancient and utterly modern. He took out his own much older smartphone and made a call. Arthur, he said, his voice devoid of any warmth, it's Harlan Delaney. My grandson-in-law's divorce lawyer. No, my own. I need to see you this afternoon. We are restructuring the primary family trust. Effective immediately, he hung up. No bluster. No threats, just the quiet, irrevocable sound of signatures being prepared. As I was leaving the club, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Violet. It was the predictable, panicked response of someone whose attorney had just explained to them the grim reality of a false light lawsuit backed by a sworn declaration. Rowan, the text read, I'm so sorry you felt hurt by the album. I was just trying to create a certain vibe, you know, for the brand. I guess I just got carried away with the art of it all. This has all been blown so out of proportion. Can we please just talk and be a family again? I miss you. It was a paragraph of pure self-serving poison. Sorry you felt hurt, not sorry for what I did. The art of it all, not my malicious eraser. It was a non-apology. A desperate attempt to rewind the clock to a time when her actions had no consequences. I stood on the cold stone steps of the Union Club. I did not reply. I took a screenshot of the message. I opened my email, attached the image, and sent it to my encrypted vault. The absence of an admission, I knew, was its own form of evidence, and I was collecting everything. The silence that followed my grandfather's intervention was absolute. The legal threat from Bracken Alder hung in the air, a sword of Damocles that my family's incompetent lawyer, Arthur Finch, had no idea how to stop. Harlan's move to restructure the trust was a quiet, seismic event happening beneath the surface, a tectonic shift they couldn't yet feel, but would soon find had swallowed their world. They were cut off, cornered, and for the first time in their lives, utterly powerless. Then the invitations went out. It was an event my mother had been planning for a year, the Riverton Heritage Gala. It was the absolute pinnacle of the town's social calendar, held at the museum. And Margaret, of course, was the chair. The embossed cardstock felt heavy in my hand, a relic from a life I no longer lived. I was about to throw it in the recycling bin when a smaller, separate card slipped out. It was pale grey with the museum's official letterhead. The Riverton Museum of Heritage is proud to honour Rowan Delaney, founder and CEO of Lumen Vale Beauty, for her generous endowment of the Riverton STEM Scholarship Program. I was an honoured donor. I smiled. It was a cold, thin smile. This was not a social invitation. It was a professional obligation. My mother's gala. Her night to preside over the town's elite, to cement her status as the matriarch of Riverton. And as I knew from her original event proposal, which she had sent me months ago, while soliciting the sponsorship I had just cancelled, the evening's entertainment was to be a slideshow she and Violet had prepared, a slideshow titled The Delaney Legacy. This was their stage. This was the venue they had chosen to launch their brand, the brand built on my erasure. They were going to present their counterfeit legacy in the very museum my money was helping to fund. I went to my computer. I opened the gala's digital RSVP portal. And I clicked yes, but I was not coming as a guest. I was coming as a donor, a CEO, and a curator. I called Dr. Al-Jamil, the museum's chief curator. I had met her twice during the negotiations for the STEM scholarship. She was a sharp, no-nonsense woman with a deep respect for provenance. Dr. Al-J, I said, my voice warm but precise. I have a last-minute donation, a piece of art I'd like to commission for the gala. It's a small, modern installation, a triptych, a commentary on digital identity, truth, and memory, and the concept of the null self. She was intrigued. What's it called? Null Daughter, I said. The piece was simple, stark, and brutal. I commissioned our top R&D fabricators to build it. It was a triptych of 3 large, backlit screens framed in minimalist black steel. The center screen, the largest, would display the original, unaltered raw file from Evan Pike, EP4593_bot.cr3. The family in all its flawed, authentic color. Me on the edge in my slate blue dress. The two smaller screens on either side would display the fabrications. On the left, the finished export, Delaney_portrait_group01.jpg. The seamless brick, the perfect eraser. On the right, the screenshot of the other lie. Clara laughing at the angelic, hazy bloom of light where I was supposed to be. In front of the installation, on the floor, would be a simple black foot pedal. When a guest stepped on it, the center screen, the truth, would instantly flicker to black, leaving only the two flanking lies. The room would be filled with the images of my absence. When they lifted their foot, the truth would snap back into place, bright and undeniable. It was art. It was evidence, and it forced the viewer to participate in the act of erasure. Dr. Al-Jamal was cautious. A piece with such strong documentary elements would need full legal clearance, provenance, permissions. Of course, I said. My counsel will send over the courtesy packet. David at Bracken Alder assembled it within an hour. It was not a threat. It was a file of immaculate permissions. It contained the signed, notarized declaration from Evan Pike giving his enthusiastic and full permission to use his unaltered raw files for this specific artistic purpose. It included my own signed, notarized release for the use of my likeness. It included a statement of provenance detailing the metadata, the timestamps, and the digital chain of custody that proved the erased images were fraudulent alterations. The museum's legal team, faced with a file that was infinitely more professional and buttoned up than anything Margaret's family attorney could produce, cleared the installation in less than a day. Null Daughter was given a prime, standalone position in the museum's modern wing, on the direct path from the entrance to the grand ballroom where the gala would be held. Then, with 2 weeks to go, Violet escalated. She was desperate. The flow of money was cut off. Her mortgage payment was looming. And her punished for art story had sputtered out. She made a final, catastrophic miscalculation. She launched a website. It was a pre-order site for a pop-up shop tied to the gala. The Delaney Legacy, curated heirlooms for a timeless life. She was selling beige linen napkins, overpriced beeswax candles, and as the centerpiece, limited edition archival prints of the Thanksgiving photographs. The hero image on the website's landing page was the fully erased, perfect family portrait. She was actively, publicly trying to monetize the lie. She was selling the fraudulent image. She truly believed I would not fight back in public. She believed my desire to avoid a scandal was greater than my will to survive. She had mistaken my silence for fear. I forwarded the URL to David. My message was 2 words: shut it down. This time, the legal response was not a letter. It was a 24-hour non-negotiable notice sent directly to the website's hosting platform. It was a combined DMCA takedown notice and a formal tortious interference claim. We cited the copyright of Evan Pike, whose work was being used without permission in a fraudulent, altered state. We cited my own rights of likeness. We informed the platform's general counsel that by hosting this fraudulent content, they were now complicit and would be named as a co-defendant in the impending lawsuit. The timer started while the legal clock ticked down. I firewalled my life. First, and most importantly, Mira. I arranged for her to have a 2-night sleepover at her best friend Sophie's house. I packed her overnight bag myself, making sure to include her favorite worn-out stuffed seal and the new graphic novel she'd been wanting. You're going to have the best time, I told her, kissing her on the forehead as I dropped her off. They have a trampoline. I have a boring work dinner, and I will be there to pick you up for pancakes the morning after. Deal. Deal. She said, already running to the door. I watched her go, feeling the clean, bright boundary I was drawing around her childhood. The shrapnel from this explosion, the blast radius of my decisions, would not touch her. I would not be my mother. Second, the corporate front. My PR team at Lumen Vale, fully briefed by me and my counsel, drafted the official talking points. As the honored donor, I would be expected to speak. The points were sterile, professional, and powerful. They centered on 3 words: art, consent, and truth. Lumen Vale believes authenticity is non-negotiable in our products and in our partners. We stand against the unethical use of digital manipulation and the misrepresentation of artists' work. No family names, no personal grievances, just the unassailable high ground. Finally, the expert witness. Evan Pike, whose professional reputation had been co-opted and abused by my family, was furious. He readily agreed to attend the gala. But he wasn't coming as my guest. He was coming as a speaker. Dr. Al-Jamil, who now fully understood the story behind Noel Daughter, had quietly organized a 15-minute ethics and photography presentation to occur just before the main gala dinner. His topic, the ethics of polishing documentary family photography, where artistry ends and erasure begins. The stage was set. The pieces were in place. The night before the gala, at 5:01 p.m., the 24-hour notice expired. I opened my browser and typed in the URL for Violet's Delaney Legacy pre-order site. It was dark. It was not a 404 not found error. It was a clean white screen from the e-commerce host in stark black sans serif font that read, "This site has been suspended for a violation of our terms of service related to copyright and fraudulent representation." They hadn't just taken it down. It had been seized. Violet's response, logged forever in frame 02, was immediate. A new Instagram story. This time, a black screen with desperate white text, "My art is being censored by powerful evil people. They are trying to silence my truth. This is unbelievable." But the narrative was no longer hers to control. The gossip account that had been tracking her posted a screenshot of the suspension notice. "This isn't haters," the caption read. "This is a formal copyright takedown. What truth is being silenced?" Violet Delaney. The comments on her post began to turn, "Wait, what copyright? Did you not pay the photographer? My friend is on the gala committee. She said there's a whole art piece about a faked photo. What evil people? Don't you just mean your sister?" The questions were getting sharper. The timeless, neutral brand was cracking, revealing the ugly, frantic wiring underneath. The gala was in less than 24 hours. The air in the museum foyer was a physical weight, thick with a conflicting sense of haughty lies, old money, and anxiety. It was the signature perfume of the Riverton Heritage Gala. A low, pressurized hum of 300 people performing their social standing vibrated beneath the requisite string quartet. I had arrived alone, not as a Delaney, but as Rowan Delaney, the honored donor. My dress was not slate blue. It was a deep, structured midnight silk that felt less like a garment and more like armor. I saw them instantly. They were clustered near the grand staircase, a tableau of curated denial. My mother, Margaret, was a vision in pearls and champagne taffeta. Her smile a brittle, painted rictus, her eyes darting around the room, counting allies. My father, Thomas, stood beside her, suffocating in a tuxedo that was a size too tight, his face a pale, mottled red. He looked like a man who had been holding his breath for a week. And Violet. She was in winter white, a flowing, ethereal gown meant to broadcast purity, art, and innocence. Her smile was the most fragile of all, a thin layer of ice over a deep, dark panic. They were a perfect, timeless, neutral portrait of a family braced for detonation. They hadn't seen me, or were pretending they hadn't. As I moved past the check-in table, a man in a dark, impeccably tailored suit, a discreet earpiece in place, gave me a fractional nod. He was not museum staff. He was Mr. Hayes, a retired federal marshal, now a private consultant, retained by Bracken Alder. He murmured, his voice flat, "Ms. Delaney. Delaney, we are confirmed." The crowd parted for him. His calm was a void, sucking the frantic energy from the room. He saw me. His sharp blue eyes met mine, and he gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. The final piece was on the board. Guests were being gently guided from the foyer toward the grand ballroom for the presentations. As I passed the welcome table, I picked up the evening's program. The embossed card stock felt like a weapon. I opened it. 7:30 p.m. Welcome remarks. 7:45 p.m. A special presentation on photographic ethics. 8 p.m. The centerpiece of my mother's night, the Delaney Legacy, a slideshow prepared by Ms. Violet Delaney. She was actually going through with it. Even after her website had been seized, even after the cease and desist, she still believed she could stand on this stage in her white dress and present her lie. A cold, clean thrill shot through me. She was walking willingly into the kill box I had built. As I neared the ballroom, I saw Dr. Al-Jamil, the curator, speaking quietly to the museum's AV technician in the booth. The tech nodded, his eyes on his screen, and gave her a thumbs up. He was cued. The file he had ready was not Violet's beige-toned pitch deck. It was my file. The only path to the ballroom was a long gallery in the museum's modern wing. And in the center of that gallery stood my installation. Null Daughter. A crowd had already formed. It was unavoidable. A stark, three-screen monolith in the center of the hall. I watched from a distance. A man in a velvet jacket, a local banker, stepped on the black foot pedal. Click. The central, brightly lit screen, the truth. The unaltered raw file, with me in my blue dress, snapped to black. The only remaining light came from the two flanking screens, the two lies, the seamless brick on the left, the angelic, hazy blur on the right. A collective, audible gasp rippled through the onlookers. "My God," a woman whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. That's Rowan Delaney. She's gone." The man lifted his foot. Click. I was back. He pressed it again. Click. I was erased. They were playing it like a morbid toy. Their faces a mask of confusion, intrigue, and dawning horror. The word erased was being whispered, passed from guest to guest like a contagion. I saw my family swept along in the flow of guests, unable to avoid it. I watched Margaret's face go slack. Her eyes locking onto the blinking triptych. Her smile didn't just falter. It shattered. Her hand gripped Thomas's arm so hard he winced. Violet saw it and froze, her face as white as her dress, her eyes wide with a trapped animal panic. They had just seen the public artistic rendering of their crime. We were seated at our respective tables. Mine was at the front, the honored donor table. Theirs was adjacent, the gala chair table. The lights dimmed. Dr. Al-Jamil welcomed the guests, then introduced the first speaker. "And now," she said, her voice crisp, "a special presentation by the acclaimed documentary photographer, Mr. Evan Pike, on the ethics of polishing documentary family photography." Evan stepped to the podium. He was the image of calm professionalism. He did not look at my family. He looked at the audience. He was not there to accuse. He was there to educate. He was there to provide facts. "Good evening," he began. His first slide appeared on the massive screen above the stage. It was a screenshot of the metadata panel from a Photoshop file. In my profession, there is a bright, clear, and non-negotiable line. It is the line between color correction and fabrication. It is the line between enhancing a moment and erasing a person. A murmur, low and anxious, moved through the ballroom. He clicked to the next slide. It was the screenshot from my vault. The layer stack. This, he said, his voice level and clear, is not art. This is a digital record of a decision. You can see the layer groups named by the user, fill brick, clone stamp rug, and most explicitly, erase the murmur grew louder. People were shifting in their seats, looking down at their programs, then glancing furtively at Violet's table. When a photographer's original work, Evan continued, is taken, altered to this degree without consent, and then presented to the world as truth, it is not curation. It is a fraudulent act. It is a violation of my copyright, and it is a violation of the truth. He clicked to a final slide showing the file timestamps. The original, unaltered files were delivered on November 27th. The alterations, as you can see by the user tag, Violet Design, were made on December 4th. The ethics are simple. We are hired to document a family's legacy, not to manufacture a false one to fit an aesthetic. He stepped down to a wave of stunned, powerful applause. The expert witness had testified. The jury was primed. The lights dimmed further. The gala's MC, a local news anchor, read from the teleprompter. And now, he said, a very special presentation of the Delaney legacy, a slideshow prepared by our gala chair, Margaret Delaney, and Ms. Violet Delaney. A single spotlight hit Violet's table. She stood up, her movements jerky, robotic. She was trapped. She could not refuse. She was walking to the podium, her white dress trailing behind her, but she looked like a ghost, a woman walking to her own execution. She must have thought, hoped, prayed that the tech would play her file. The screen flickered. It was not her slideshow. It was the stark, silent, blinking violence of my comparison reel on a 30-foot screen for the entire elite of Riverton to see. My face present in slate blue, smiling at the edge. Click. Gone, replaced by brick. Click. Present. Click. Gone. The ballroom was plunged into a rhythmic, strobing silence broken only by the sound of my own digital heartbeat. Present gone. The collective horrified gasp from the Null Daughter exhibit was nothing compared to this. This was a silent scream. Violet, standing at the podium, finally broke. She didn't speak. She screamed. It was not a word, just a high, thin sound of pure, undiluted panic. No. That's not, stop it. Stop it. Turn it off. She lunged from the podium, not toward her seat, but toward the AV console at the side of the stage. Mr. Hayes, the marshal, moved with impossible speed. He did not touch her. He simply materialized in her path, a solid, immovable object in a dark suit. He said, his voice professional, quiet, and yet projecting perfectly into the hush. The presentation is running as scheduled. I felt a hot breath at my ear. My mother, leaning in from her table, her pearls luminous in the blinking light of my erasure. Her voice was a low, venomous hiss. For my ears only, she hissed, you are humiliating this family. I did not turn my head. I did not break my gaze from the screen. My voice was level, cold, and clear. Truth isn't humiliation, mother. The blinking stopped. The screen held on the final, damning image. The unaltered, true portrait. Me present on the edge, eyes bright, into the suffocating, absolute silence. A new voice cut through. Excuse me. Harlan Delaney was rising from his seat. He tapped his cane once on the parquet floor. The sound was like a gavel. As donor emeritus of this institution, he said, his voice steady, captured perfectly by the podium microphone Violet had abandoned, I asked for 5 minutes. The room stilled completely. All breathing seemed to stop. Harland walked slowly, deliberately to the stage. He did not look at his son. He did not look at his granddaughter, frozen by the marshal. He did not look at his daughter-in-law, who was staring at him, her face a mask of disbelief. He looked only at the audience. He reached the podium. He took a breath. And then he signaled, not to me, to the back of the room. A man in a severe dark suit, a man I recognized from the Union Club library, stepped forward. It was Harlan's personal attorney. He was carrying 3 simple, white, letter-sized envelopes. He did not walk to the stage. He walked with calm, deliberate steps toward Mr. Hayes, who still stood guarding the console. There was a quiet, professional exchange. The attorney handed the 3 envelopes to the marshal. The attorney then turned and walked back to his position at the rear of the ballroom. Harlan had the microphone. The marshal now had the envelopes. The trap was complete. Harlan stood at the podium, a frail, stooped figure, who somehow seemed to command all the gravity in the room. The blinking image of my face appearing and disappearing on the 30-foot screen had stopped. Now, only the true, unaltered photograph remained, a silent, damning testament. Harlan did not need to raise his voice. The hush in the grand ballroom was so absolute, so profound, that his quiet, steady words landed with the force of a physical blow. A legacy, he began, his voice amplified by the microphone, is not a collection of perfect pictures. It is the sum of our actions. It is the truth we pass down. When the image we project becomes more important than the people we are meant to love, when image outweighs person, our legacy is counterfeit. He looked out at the 300 assembled guests, the cream of Riverton society, their faces pale and wrapped in the dim light. He was not speaking to them. He was delivering a verdict. From his jacket pocket, he withdrew a folded piece of legal paper. He unfolded it slowly, the crisp sound of the paper crackling in the silence. As the trustee of the Delaney Family Trust established in 1978, he announced, I am invoking the discretionary power granted to me under Article 9, Section 4. The Heart Clause. I saw my mother's hand fly to her mouth. My father seemed to shrink in his chair. This was a ghost they had forgotten, a piece of legal architecture from a man they had long since written off as a senile figurehead. This clause, Harlan continued, his voice steady, was written for a moment, just like this. It was written for a time when our name might forget its heart. It allows for the full and immediate restructuring of all assets in the event of acts of knowing erasure and coercion. He lifted the paper and read from it. Therefore, effective as of this morning, December the 12th, I have signed a binding and irrevocable amendment to the trust. All principal assets, including the property at 4012, Riverton Heights, all related endowments, and all remaining financial holdings, will pass in their entirety into a new, separate trust for the sole benefit of my granddaughter, Rowan Delaney, and her minor daughter, Mira. A collective, strangled sound emanated from my family's table. It was the sound of a world ending. Harlan was not finished. He read the final, brutal sentence. For their documented acts of knowing erasure and coercion, my son Thomas Delaney, his wife Margaret Delaney, and their daughter Violet Delaney Grant are hereby expressly and permanently excluded from any and all benefits of the Delaney Family Trust, now and in perpetuity. He folded the paper. The sentence was passed. The fortune they had treated as a birthright, the legacy they had tried to curate by cutting me out, was now mine. All of it. As if on a silent cue from an unseen director, the massive screen behind Harlan shifted one last time. It was no longer the blinking comparison. It was a single, still, high-resolution image, the unaltered Thanksgiving portrait. Me restored, standing at the edge. My slate blue dress a defiant splash of color in their beige world. My eyes, even from a distance, looked bright, clear, and alive. Into the stunned, tomb-like silence of the ballroom, a new, quiet movement began. It was not dramatic. It was precise. It was the movement of procedure, of consequences being delivered. Mr. Hayes, the marshal, who had been standing guard by the console, turned. In his hands were the 3 white, letter-sized envelopes his attorney had given him. He moved with a calm, unhurried grace. A man simply doing his job. He did not rush. He did not make a scene. He was the personification of cold, hard, unavoidable fact. He approached my family's table. He did not speak. He simply placed the first envelope squarely in front of Violet. He placed the second in front of my mother. He placed the third and final envelope in front of my father. Then he stepped back, his duty fulfilled, and stood, a silent, watchful presence. I knew what was in those envelopes. They were a triptych of ruin. The first document was the cease and desist order from Bracken Alder, a formal demand to stop any and all exploitation of my likeness, and Evan Pike's copyrighted work. The second was a courtesy draft of the civil complaint for false light and misappropriation. A detailed, multi-page preview of the public, humiliating lawsuit that would be filed in federal court within 48 hours if my demands were not met. The third was the most personal, and perhaps the most cruel. It was a formal notice of termination for every supported account, every subsidy, every lifeline. And attached to it, for each of them, was a neatly printed, itemized ledger from my Lifeline spreadsheet, showing every dollar I had ever given them, a final, damning accounting of their dependency. Violet's hands, shaking uncontrollably, tore at her envelope. Her eyes scanned the first page. Her face, already pale, turned a waxy, translucent white. The mask of the ethereal artist finally, irrevocably shattered. She looked up, her eyes wild, locking onto mine across the table. She began to stammer, the words tumbling out in a panicked, incoherent rush, a confession born not of remorse, but of sheer animal terror. "We can fix this," she whispered, her voice a raw, desperate croak that carried in the dead silence. "Rowan, we can fix it. I'll post the warm ones, the originals. We can blur the dress, make it neutral." She caught herself. Her own words, her own panicked admission of her intent, hung in the air like poison gas. She had just confessed in front of 300 witnesses that her only objection had been the color of my dress. From his seat in the aisle, Evan Pike did not stand. He did not shout. He simply spoke. His voice carrying with the quiet authority of an expert witness delivering his final, irrefutable testimony. There was nothing to fix. The words landed like a judge's gavel. My mother, Margaret, seemed to crumple. Her face, a moment before a mask of fury, collapsed into a horrifying plea. She reached across the small space between the tables, her hand outstretched. Not for me, but for Harland, who was walking slowly back from the podium. She reached for his arm. "Harland," she breathed, the name a ragged plea. "Father." He did not pull away. He simply, gently, with a sorrow that seemed ancient, removed her hand from his arm. He did not look at her. He continued his slow, steady walk back to his seat and sat down. The connection was severed. The appeal was denied. And then it was my turn. I stood up. I walked the few steps to the podium. I was not shaking. I was not angry. I felt a vast, calm clarity. The room was a sea of pale, upturned faces. I looked over them, and for the first time, I felt no fear. I was not the variable. I was the constant. My voice, when I spoke into the microphone, was level and strong. It was the voice of a CEO, who had just successfully executed a hostile takeover. "I won't be erased," I said, my words echoing in the vast, silent room. "Not in albums, not in budgets, and not in life." A single, blinding flash popped from the press pit at the back of the room. It was the sound of a new photo being taken, a new document, a new truth. It captured me alone at the podium, the unaltered portrait of my restored family glowing on the screen behind me. And in the background, out of focus, but forever part of the frame, you could just make out the dark, professional figures of the servers. Their work, finally and irrevocably done.